Let's just get this demonetization right out of the way. Few art industries can be so illustrious as to look back on its genesis and say with absolute confidence, one man's hatred for his own mother's vagina started it all. But here we are with Scorn, a game that illustrates H.R. Giger's art that created masterworks like Aliens, Contra, Darkseid, and an entire genre that involves sticky openings and stickier endings. Is Scorn worth getting due to its incredible atmosphere and high action? Well, one of those is right. What about Gamepass, though? Let's see. If you like the video, maybe subscribe. Let's talk about Scorn, the first game that gives true meaning to skeleton keys. Scorn is about the liquid insides of humans on the outside, or maybe not humans, but at the very least close enough, approximates, to cause you to flinch just a little bit when you deshell one of them, and you have to listen to them screaming just so you can use them as the world's first living lockpick. Or using a bent Shanker RC car controller to get through a door 1 second and ripping someone's arms off the next. It's all about walking around in environmental storytelling. And the story starts out like any horror game does, with you being birthed into what looks like hell, an alien spaceship, a Warhammer 40,000 fans' wet dream, or a mix of all of them. Your job is to, well, you're not really sure, at least at the very starting. It seems like you need to escape, but are you going down into hell, or up into a spaceship, or out into the world? For much of this first-person game, it's up in the air, at the same time most of your insides are exposed to it. Some games exist on the substrate of core mechanics, with the story using the building blocks of action, movement, and reaction to fundamentally easily track reactions as the basics of a story for a player. Others reverse that, offering atmosphere, mystery, and intangibles like environmental storytelling, like a digital version of an old man on a log at a campfire trying to consistently elicit emotional reactions from the listeners. That's Scorn, with you walking through this landscape, working out organic puzzles to get just a little bit further and figure out just a little bit more, or at least try to. And that's where the presentation comes into this, with that consistent storytelling across the very odd art style. Scorn is a dark world, a world seething in anti-human sentiment. Even though it doesn't overly display it right from the start, later on in the game, you're actually going to be tearing your own insides out. It's the hunchback look of every tool and item in the game. It's the orifice-riddled mechanisms that suck and sluice and slurp as you stick fingers into them, or hands, or worse, to get them to work. It's the ribs along locations that consistently speak of the game player as an invader almost inside the game world. Targeted cells that always have a specific amount of time before the game's antibodies, in the forms of horrors and abominations, find you. And the game's consistently reminding you of this, and body horror at its utmost. Even when it's slightly not, it's still reminding you that that's just where you came from, or where you're heading too soon. Is that a light of an ancient spaceship long lost, or herpes blisters in the future glow in the dark for the undead? These are legit questions, for sure, and you try to figure them out. While there are not a bevy of creatures in the game, the ones that are here, that design is the same way. There's a form that you can discern from those that you do see, even if that form comes in the way of sacrificial puzzles that you need to chop parts off of to get pieces for a different puzzle completely. Texture-wise and architecturally, the game is phenomenal looking if this is your style. Performance, I would like this to be a bit increased, especially on the PC. While the game has a very solid FPS once it gets going on any of the cards, there is a bit of stutter when it's loading in, and this is not using direct storage on the PCs, though the developers originally said that it was. Even without using FSR, a 3080 is easily going to get you above 80 FPS, but when going to new locations, you notice this fine stutter that can pop and start at different times. Once you've explored the location, then it sort of solidifies down. This was also tested on a PCIe 4 Gen NVMe. Here's the thing, yes, this is a walking game, and even when running, you're still pretty slow, which lets you take in the looks, the wet slopping of mucus coming from some hole that a weird-tongued worm just crawled into, or exploring massive sandstorm raging landscapes as you walk towards a spaceship, or a space church, or a tomb. You're never quite sure, and that's exactly how this presentation should be. Let's talk a little bit about the gameplay. Scorn is heavily inspired by walking simulators, titles like The Witness, Vanishing of Ethan Carter, and more, though there is less to do with the latter and more to do with the former when you look at this game. The game's replacement for mechanics is puzzles, atmosphere, and even the slight doling out of weapons. But it isn't really weapons. Their impact here is more about making you understand that, for the most part, you can run away from the enemies. If you do go up close and fight them, dying is not difficult to do, and you'll restart from a checkpoint. This is a puzzle walking game, and these puzzles are very interesting, even if at times you realize that it seems they might just be excuses for you doing damage to everything around you to see what triggers your gag reflex or your horror sense the quickest. That's about it, though. That is the way the game works. It's a curtain of suspense drawn so tightly over the gameplay that it begins to trap it, and in trapping it, that becomes the gameplay itself for better or worse, as it tightens more and more around you, as you realize there's really less and less you can do, which then extends your ability to understand what's going on in the environment and look around, knowing that maybe while you might miss a thing or two as you continue to play, you can always circle back around to sort of find it. But at the same time, you're consistently understanding that something very weird is going on here. This is one of the best parts of walking simulators if you like these games. The gameplay is not detailed. That's not what it's about. But the puzzle work and its interaction with the environments is what it's about, and it's pretty good here. When it comes to audio, the game's audio is almost entirely sound effects, and they're pretty good. Whether it's the slopping of some mucus-filled hole, or it's just you walking around on the sandy covering of some kind of deserted planet, or you're deep in the bowels of what looks like a rib cage of some alien. Music, there's a disturbing undercurrent that's there. It's not to cause you to headbang along like the action in Doom, but it's for you to forget it's there. Most of it is more the environmental kind of soundscape that you get. It's a lot of creaks and groans. It's the sounds of the environment itself making music. And while there are some tense moments elsewhere, it's not really about that. And that's fine with me. I thought the audio was done well. And that does bring us to the most unique part of this review, and that's fun factor. Scorn is a weird game. It's an odd game. In many ways, people are going to wonder if it's a game at all. It is, for sure. It has mechanics to be called that, but it's also so dialed into suspense and horror and mystery that it can be a little bit confusing. I found the puzzles fine, though they were a little bit basic as you continue to play. If you find looking at disturbing art or love the idea of leaping into body horror and walking through it and interacting at times with the artistry itself, then this title might be labeled as fun for you. I wouldn't call it fun. I would call it highly interesting as an idea, and more importantly, as an experience in games. And I certainly have no issue with those kind of games. That's exactly what we need in the industry. But fun is a difficult thing to really gauge, because horror is a slimmer genre anyway. Then you add in walking simulator, then you add in a game that doesn't have any speech and isn't going out of its way to tell you anything. And you can add that niche and a niche and a niche until it's a very small subset of people who are going to want to jump into this. And that brings me to the rating. So as you guys know, I usually rate a game buy, wait for a sale, rent, or never touch it again. But this game is not only on sale, it's also in Gamepass. And I think Gamepass is a perfect place for this. Not because it is not worth it. We'll talk about that in a second. But because this is such a tight niche and one of those titles that fits very deeply in it. It's doing nothing else to reach out to you. I can see a lot of people using Game Pass to experience in this and have a great time doing so. When you talk about the full cost, this title is very difficult for me to say it is worth it at the full cost, for the simple fact that it's not super long and there's not a lot going on. If you're a fan of the genre, though, the very, very specific one, this could easily be something that you will want to experience. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys like these videos. If you do, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Check out the other videos that are coming out. We got some more AI reviews. We got a ton more reviews this week and next week. It is going to be insane. Peace out, everybody. Oh, check out the Patreon. It helps continue keeping the channel going.